Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going back to Queens, New York in 1991.
Oh, yeah.
And you've brought some fascinating sources about a guy named Lester Ford,
Yes.
news clippings, Wikipedia excerpts, the whole works. And, well, his crimes are chilling.
There.
He was known as Justice by some, but ended up being a serial killer terrorizing the community.
Right.
So let's try to unpack this case, shall we? Where should we begin?
Well, that nickname Justice, that's what gets me.
Mm.
It makes you think, do nicknames reveal something or are they hiding something? It's like he was wearing a mask, hiding the darkness underneath.
Yeah, okay, so right away we're seeing this, contrast between how he was perceived and what he actually did.
Exactly.
But before we get too deep into that, let's back up a bit. You have information about Ford's early life.
I do, yeah. We know he's born in '63, grew up in St. Albans,
Okay.
had 5 siblings. A pretty normal childhood, it seems like, until his first run-in with the law back in '79.
Oh, wow.
It was a drug-related offense that landed him 10 years in prison.
A decade. That's a long time.
It is.
He got out in '89, returned to St. Albans, and is that when he got the Justice nickname?
That's right. And it makes you wonder if that was intentional, like he was trying to project this image.
Right.
Or maybe some people really saw him that way. Either way, it's ironic, given what he went on to do.
Yeah, very heavy irony. Well, let's get into that. His first victim, according to these articles, was a woman named Sheilda Dixon,
Yes.
36 years old.
January 6, 1991, Dixon was strangled
Oh my God.
and left at the Peters Park baseball field.
A baseball field.
Yeah, and what's really chilling is that her body wasn't found until the 24th. Imagine the agony her family went through not knowing for weeks.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking to even think about. And then a little over a month later, Tracy Covington becomes his next victim.
Yes, February 23rd, strangulation again.
Oh, wow.
But this time it happened outside of her own home.
So this is when the police started to think something bigger was going on.
Right. 2 murders, so close together. And with the same MO, that's when the fear of a serial killer on the loose became very real.
I can only imagine the fear that sent through the community. And this is when things start to escalate.
Sadly, yes. And that's something we see all the time with serial offenders.
Really?
Yeah. On July 4th of '91, Ford rapes a 16-year-old girl.
Oh, God.
He didn't kill her, but this was a major shift in his behavior.
Right.
Even more aggression, more depravity, just a total disregard for human life.
Okay, but then less than a month later, it takes an even more horrifying turn with the attack on Sabrina Faust.
Faust's case is incredibly disturbing. She was 20 years old and 8 months pregnant when Ford attacked her.
8 months pregnant.
Yeah, it was July 24th. He raped her and then shot her in the face.
Oh, my God.
It's unbelievable.
But wait, there is something about Faust's case in these news clippings, something but a miracle?
Absolutely. Somehow, despite being shot, Faust managed to hold on long enough to give birth to her baby boy, Brian.
Oh, wow.
She tragically died a few hours later, but her son's survival, that's a testament to her strength and the power of a mother's love.
That is truly amazing. Such a glimmer of hope in this dark story. But the violence didn't end there, did it?
No, the very next day, July 25th, Ford rapes another woman. Thankfully, she survives. But this repeated violence just shows the terrifying pattern we've been talking about, just the escalation and the lack of remorse. It's just brutal.
It's hard to understand how anyone could do such things, but at least it seems this last attack led to his capture, right?
That's right. The 29-year-old survivor, she gave the police crucial information that led to his arrest on July 26th.
Thank goodness for that. But wait, there's more, right? His girlfriend was also involved.
Yes, and this is a crazy detail. Ford's girlfriend was actually arrested for threatening and intimidating one of the other survivors.
What?
Yeah, she was trying to prevent her from testifying.
Wow, so she was complicit in all of this.
It seems that way. It's just a reminder that sometimes the people closest to the perpetrator enable and perpetuate the violence.
It's mind-blowing, the whole thing. So Ford gets arrested. What happens next?
Well, facing a possible death sentence, Ford decides to make a deal.
Okay.
In March of '92, he pleads guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder.
That's a pretty standard move in a case like this. What was his sentence?
40 years to life. He's currently at the Elmira Correctional Facility.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Ford's early life, the escalation of his crimes, the capture and the conviction. It's heavy stuff.
It is.
But we're not done yet, are we? There's still more to explore.
Oh, absolutely. We've just scratched the surface. We need to look at the impact all of this had on the community, the ethical questions around supporting the families of perpetrators,
Right.
and, of course, the question of Brian, the son born amidst all this horror. There's so much more to unpack.
And unpack we will, but for now, let's just sit with what we've learned so far. It's a story of unimaginable darkness, but as we saw with Sabrina Faust, it's also a story of incredible resilience. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into the case of Lester Ford.
It's funny, we keep coming back to that nickname Justice.
Yeah.
It's just so jarring to think about. This guy who inflicted so much pain on others being called Justice.
Yeah, it really makes you think about that disconnect between how people saw him and what he was really like.
Right, like who gave him that name? Did they have any idea of the darkness inside him?
Or was it just a strange coincidence, like a cosmic joke almost?
It's hard to know for sure, but it shows us how easily we can be fooled by appearances. Makes you wonder, how did someone who was known as Justice end up committing such horrific acts?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's easy to just label him a monster and move on.
Yeah.
But I think there has to be more to the story, something that pushed him down this path.
Well, we can't ignore his past, especially that 10-year prison sentence,
Right.
a decade in prison for a drug offense. That had to have a profound impact on him.
Yeah, prison's not exactly known for being a positive environment.
It's not. It's a breeding ground for violence and negativity.
You're exposed to that for 10 years, it's bound to change you, right?
Absolutely. It's not just the
Yeah.
violence itself. It's the isolation, the loss of control, the constant fear. It dehumanizes you.
It makes you feel like an outsider, cut off from the rest of society.
Exactly. And it can warp your worldview,
Yeah.
make you feel disconnected from the values of the outside world.
And we have to consider not everyone going into prison is in a great place mentally to begin with.
Right. There could be pre-existing issues, anger problems, a lack of empathy, things like that.
And prison doesn't necessarily create those problems, but it definitely makes them worse.
Definitely. Think about someone who's already prone to aggression being thrown into that environment.
Yeah.
It's volatile.
It's like a pressure cooker, all those negative emotions building up with no healthy outlet.
And then you add the challenge of re-entering society after being locked up for so long. It's incredibly difficult.
You're right. You've got that stigma attached to you.
It's hard to find your place, to rebuild a life, to feel like you belong again.
You still feel like an outsider even though you're back in the free world.
Exactly. And that feeling of alienation, it can push people toward the fringes of society,
Yeah.
make them more vulnerable to criminal influences and less likely to seek help when they need it.
So we're talking about this perfect storm of factors, the prison experience, maybe some pre-existing vulnerabilities, and then the struggle to reintegrate back into society.
Right, all of that pushing someone like Ford down a dark path.
It's complex, there's no easy answer, but understanding those factors is key to helping others avoid a similar fate.
Absolutely, it's not about excusing Ford's actions, but it's about understanding what leads someone to that point.
It's about looking beyond those simple labels of good and evil and recognizing the complexities of human behavior.
Exactly. And by doing that, we can start to find more effective ways to prevent these tragedies from happening.
You know, one thing that keeps sticking with me is Sabrina Faust's story.
Yeah,
The fact that she fought to survive long enough to give birth to her son, it's just incredible.
it really is. It shows the power of the human spirit.
Makes you wonder, what happened to Brian?
That's a good question, and one our sources don't answer, but it raises some important ethical questions.
Right, like what kind of life did he have?
Growing up knowing the circumstances of his birth.
It's a reminder that the impact of Ford's crimes extends far beyond the immediate victims.
It affects families, children. It ripples outwards for generations.
And we have to think about the community of St. Albans as a whole.
Right, the fear they must have felt knowing a serial killer was on the loose.
The constant worry, the sense of vulnerability, that takes a toll.
It's a collective trauma that the whole community had to process.
So how does a community heal from something like that?
It's a long and difficult process, but it starts with acknowledging the pain,
Yeah.
creating spaces where people feel safe to share their grief, their anger, their fears.
Like those community meetings, vigils, memorials.
Exactly. It's about coming together, sharing that pain, and starting to rebuild those connections.
It's like slowly mending that tear in the fabric of the community.
Right. But healing isn't just about emotions.
Yeah, there's the practical side of things too.
It's about making people feel safe again, increasing police patrols, improving lighting, those neighborhood watch programs.
Tangible things that can make a difference.
So you also have to address the root causes of crime.
Right?
Poverty, lack of opportunity, substance abuse. Those things can't be ignored.
So it's a multi-pronged approach. You've got to tackle those systemic issues alongside the immediate needs.
Exactly. It's about creating a safer and healthier environment for everyone.
But how do you measure healing? Is there a point where a community can say, okay, we're done, we've moved on?
That's a tough one. There's no easy answer.
Right.
Healing is a journey. It's always evolving. It's about finding ways to honor the victims, to support the survivors,
Yeah.
and to build a stronger, more resilient community.
Maybe it's not about forgetting what happened, but about using that pain to create something positive.
I like that. Turning that grief and anger into action. Advocating for change, fighting for a better future.
Turning tragedy into a catalyst for progress.
That's a powerful idea, and I think it's something we can all learn from.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope for healing and growth.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that healing doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, patience, understanding, and a whole lot of support.
You know, we've talked about the community and the victims' families, but there's another group we haven't really touched on.
Yeah.
The families of the perpetrators.
Oh, that's an important one.
What happens to them when a loved one commits such horrific acts?
It's often overlooked. But imagine the shock, the disbelief, the shame they must feel.
Yeah.
They're grappling with what their loved one did while also facing judgment and stigma from the community.
It's a double burden. They're carrying the weight of their loved one's actions, plus the fear of how others will see them.
Exactly. And there's often a lot of guilt, like they should have seen the signs, maybe could have prevented it.
It's a heavy load to carry, and it can be incredibly isolating.
It is. And it reminds us that the impact of these crimes goes far beyond the immediate victims.
It's like a ripple effect, touching countless lives and creating this web of pain and suffering.
And I think it's crucial that we approach these families with empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
They're victims too, in a way, dealing with their own unique trauma.
So how can we support these families? What kind of resources are out there to help them through this?
There are organizations that focus specifically on providing support to families of those who have committed crimes,
Oh, wow.
offering therapy, support groups, educational materials, all incredibly valuable.
It's about helping them process their emotions, deal with that stigma, and ultimately rebuild their lives.
Right. It's about showing them that they're not alone and that there's hope for healing, even after something so terrible.
So we've talked about the impact on the community, the victims' families, and even the families of the perpetrators.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but there's one more piece of this puzzle I want to look at.
Okay.
The legal side of things. What happened after Ford was arrested? How did it all play out in the courtroom?
Well, remember, Ford took that plea deal,
Yeah.
pleading guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder to avoid a possible death sentence.
That makes sense strategically.
It did, but it also meant that there wasn't a full trial,
Right. No chance for the victims' families to see all the evidence presented.
or for a jury to deliver a verdict after a thorough examination of the facts.
Ooh. Yeah, it's a quicker resolution, but it can leave people feeling like justice wasn't fully served.
Definitely. And in Ford's case, it makes you question whether the plea deal truly served justice or just expedited the legal process.
It's complicated, right? Balancing the needs of the victims and society with the rights of the accused.
It's always a balancing act, and it highlights those ethical dilemmas that are built into our legal system.
Makes you think about the bigger picture.
It does. Achieving true justice involves so much more than just punishing the offender.
Right. It's about addressing those root causes of crime, supporting the victims and their families.
And working towards a sense of healing and reconciliation within the community as a whole.
It's a long and complicated process.
It is, but it's essential.
You know, as we talk about the legal aspects and the ethical questions, I keep coming back to Brian.
Faust's son.
Yeah, his story is a powerful reminder of how long-lasting the impact of these crimes can be.
Right.
He was literally born into this tragedy.
It's a stark reminder that these crimes affect generations. The ripples just keep spreading outward.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the details of Ford's crimes to the psychology of serial killers, from the investigation to the community's journey towards healing. But there's one area I want to dig into a little deeper.
What's that?
The investigation itself, the actual process of tracking down Ford.
Oh, that's a good one.
Were there any groundbreaking techniques or breakthroughs that helped crack the case?
You know, our sources don't go into too much detail about the specifics, but we can piece together some insights based on the timeline and how everything unfolded.
Let's do it. I'm ready for some detective work.
Well, think about the pressure the police must have been under, especially after that second murder.
Yeah.
2 similar killings. Everyone's afraid there's a serial killer out there.
You've got the media frenzy, the public demanding answers. It's intense.
Intense is an understatement. And that kind of pressure can lead to mistakes.
Right. Rushing into things, jumping to conclusions.
But in this case, it seems like the police were pretty thorough.
Good. They didn't let the pressure get to them.
Right. They meticulously collected evidence, interviewed witnesses, and built a profile of the killer.
So good old-fashioned detective work, pounding the pavement, following the leads.
Exactly. But they were also likely using some newer forensic techniques that were emerging in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah. Things were changing rapidly back then.
We were. DNA analysis was becoming more sophisticated.
Right.
And while our sources don't say for sure, it's possible DNA evidence played a role in linking Ford to the crimes.
Or ruling out other suspects.
Exactly. DNA technology was revolutionizing investigations back then.
Adding that scientific certainty that wasn't there before.
And alongside DNA, you had other forensic techniques like fingerprint analysis and ballistics testing, all becoming more precise.
Like putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, every piece of evidence helps paint a clearer picture.
It sounds like they were using every tool at their disposal to catch this guy.
They were, but it's important to remember, investigations are rarely a straight line.
Yeah.
There are dead ends, false leads, setbacks.
It's a winding road, lots of twists and turns.
And in Ford's case, it seems like the key breakthrough came from a somewhat unexpected source.
Oh, who's that?
The survivor of that July 25th rape.
Wow.
Her bravery in coming forward, describing the attacker, providing those crucial details that led the police to Ford.
That's amazing to go through something so traumatic and then have the strength to help bring him down.
It's remarkable, and it highlights the vital role that witnesses and survivors play in these investigations.
They provide that human element, the firsthand accounts that can back up the physical evidence.
Exactly. They help investigators connect the dots and make sense of the crime.
It's a reminder that justice relies on people having the courage to speak out and hold those responsible accountable.
Well said.
So while we may never know every single detail of the investigation, it's clear that it took a team effort.
Right. Dedicated detectives, forensic experts, courageous witnesses, all working together to catch a dangerous criminal.
It's a powerful image, and it shows how important a collaborative approach to crime solving really is.
It's not just about making an arrest. It's about understanding the why, the impact on everyone involved, and those ethical considerations that guide the pursuit of justice.
You've summed it up perfectly. It's a reminder that justice isn't a one-time event.
It's a process, a complex and ongoing process that involves a lot of different perspectives.
So we've explored the horrifying details of Ford's crimes, dug into the factors that might have led him down that path, considered the impact on everyone involved, and now we've even looked at the investigation itself.
Quite a journey.
But there's one more piece I want to unpack, one that's always fascinated me.
Go on.
The psychology of the serial killer. What drives someone to commit such horrific acts of violence?
That's a question that has baffled criminologists and psychologists for a long time.
Right.
There's no easy answer, no one-size-fits-all explanation for the mind of a serial killer.
Yeah, it's not like there's a checklist.
Exactly. But there are some common threads, some patterns that we see in these cases.
Okay, I'm all ears. What makes a serial killer tick?
One of the most prominent traits is a lack of empathy. They simply can't understand or share the feelings of others.
So they don't see their victims as human beings.
Not really. More like objects, tools, to satisfy their own needs.
That's disturbing, like they've lost touch with their own humanity.
And often that lack of empathy is combined with a sense of grandiosity.
Grandiosity.
Yeah, like they're superior to others, entitled to take what they want, even if it means hurting people.
It's like a warped sense of reality. They think the rules don't apply to them.
And that sense of grandiosity can take different forms. Some crave power and control. Some want notoriety.
Notoriety.
Yeah, they want to be infamous, their names etched in history for their terrible deeds.
It's like a dark form of celebrity, a desire to leave their mark on the world, no matter how horrific.
Exactly. And that need for recognition, it can be a powerful motivator, driving them to commit even more shocking acts.
That's a scary thought.
It is. And we also have to talk about the role of fantasy.
Oh, yeah, the inner world of a serial killer. That's always intrigued me.
Fantasy is crucial in their development. They spend hours indulging in violent fantasies, mentally rehearsing their crimes.
No, they're practicing in their minds, getting ready for the real thing.
Exactly. And those fantasies can become increasingly elaborate and twisted over time.
Blurring the lines between reality and imagination.
That's right.
So it's this combination of factors. Lack of empathy, a grandiose sense of self, and a fixation on violent fantasies.
It's a recipe for disaster. But it's important to remember there's no single profile that fits all serial killers. But understanding these recurring themes gives us a glimpse into their minds and helps us grasp how someone could become capable of such horrific acts.
It's both fascinating and deeply disturbing.
It is, but it's important to study.
It is, and it makes me wonder, are there any early warning signs, any clues that someone might be on this path?
That's a question researchers are still trying to answer definitively.
Yeah.
It's impossible to predict for sure who will become a serial killer.
Right.
But there are some behaviors and personality traits that are red flags.
Okay, like what?
Well, cruelty to animals is often cited as a major warning sign.
Makes sense if you can hurt an animal without remorse.
It suggests a lack of empathy and a desensitization to violence that could potentially extend to humans.
Right, it's a slippery slope.
And there are other things, fascination with fire setting, bedwetting past a certain age.
Things that seem unrelated but could be indicators.
Yeah, and also a pattern of lying and manipulation.
These are all behaviors that suggest some deeper issues going on.
Right. Issues that could escalate if left unaddressed.
And it's important to note, these are just potential warning signs, not guarantees.
Of course, many people exhibit these behaviors and never commit any violent crimes.
Right, it's not a one-to-one correlation.
But by being aware of these red flags, we can potentially intervene early and provide support to those who might be at risk.
It's about creating a safety net.
Exactly, a system that can catch those who are struggling and guide them towards a healthier path.
It's about making mental health care a priority, encouraging people to seek help without shame,
That's crucial.
building a society where empathy and compassion are valued.
Where we recognize that everyone's well-being is interconnected.
You know, it's easy to get lost in the darkness when talking about serial killers and the crimes.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
But I think it's crucial to remember that there's still so much good in the world.
Right, for every act of violence, there are countless acts of kindness and love.
It's easy to lose sight of that when confronted with such extreme evil.
But we have to hold on to that belief in humanity. Recognize that even in the darkest of times, people are still fighting for good.
It's a reminder that we're not powerless against evil.
We have a choice. We can choose compassion over hate, understanding over judgment, hope over despair.
Well said.
It's a message we need now more than ever.
I agree. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the psychology of the serial killer, I think the takeaway is that it's a complex issue.
Very complex.
But by learning more about it, we can better identify potential risks, intervene early, and work towards a safer world.
That's a great point. And even though we may never fully understand the motivations behind these acts, we can still learn from them.
And use that knowledge to create positive change.
Exactly. To promote empathy and compassion and strive for a future where violence is no longer the answer.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious to explore what happened after Ford's capture.
Yeah.
How did the community of St. Albans heal from this trauma? What lessons can we learn from their experience?
Those are great questions because remember, catching the perpetrator is only one part of the story.
Right. The healing process is just as important.
It's about rebuilding lives, restoring trust, and finding hope again.
Okay, so let's dive into that, the aftermath, the process of healing, and the lessons learned from this tragedy.
So we were talking about the aftermath, right? And the thing is, healing from something like this, it's not a quick fix.
Yeah, it's not like everyone just breathes a sigh of relief and moves on.
Definitely not. The scars run deep, especially in a community like St. Albans where everyone's connected.
It's like that saying, it takes a village. Well, trauma affects the whole village.
Exactly. You have to consider the ripple effect. The victims' families, their lives are forever changed.
And the community as a whole, they lived with that fear for months.
Living with that constant worry, it takes a toll.
And we can't forget the survivors, those who lived through Ford's attacks.
Right, they carry the weight of that trauma, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah. I imagine those scars might never fully fade.
For many, they don't. It's a constant struggle, flashbacks, anxiety, trouble trusting people.
It's a lot to cope with.
It is. And healing takes time. It often involves therapy, support groups, having a strong network of loved ones.
So that's on an individual level, but how does a community like St. Albans, how do they rebuild that sense of security, of togetherness after something so horrific?
It's a long process, a collective effort. It starts with acknowledging the trauma, giving people a space to grieve and be angry.
Like those community meetings, the vigils, memorial services, those are important.
They create that space for shared grief. for processing the collective pain and starting to rebuild those connections.
It's like mending the fabric of the community piece by piece.
A beautiful way to put it, but it's not just about emotional healing either.
Right. There's the practical side, too.
Making the community feel safe again. That's key. So increased police patrols, better street lighting, those neighborhood watch programs.
Use tangible things that can make a difference.
Exactly. But you also have to look at the underlying issues. The poverty, lack of opportunities, substance abuse.
You can't just put a Band-Aid on it. You have to address those root causes.
It's about creating a holistic approach, addressing all those different layers of the problem.
So it sounds like there's no easy answer, no set timeline for healing.
There isn't. It's an ongoing process, and it looks different for everyone.
But is there a point where a community can truly say they've moved on?
It's tough to say. Maybe it's not about moving on, but about moving forward.
Move you forward. I like that.
It's about finding ways to honor the victims, to support the survivors.
And to build a stronger, more resilient community.
Exactly. Learning from the past, growing from the experience.
Maybe it's about taking that pain and channeling it into something positive.
Yes. Turning that grief and anger into action.
Becoming advocates for change, fighting for a better future.
Turning tragedy into a catalyst for progress.
It's a powerful idea.
It is. And I think it's a message of hope. Even in the face of something so dark, we can choose to create light.
We've explored so much in this deep dive. The chilling details of Ford's crimes, the psychology of a serial killer, the investigation, the community's journey towards healing. It's been a lot to take in.
It has.
But it's been an important conversation, reminding us that this isn't just one man's story.
It's about all of us.
It's about the human capacity for both darkness and light, and the choices we make every day.
And the importance of understanding, empathy, and action.
If we want to build a world where these tragedies happen less often.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the case of Lester Ford.
We hope this has been insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Remember, even in the face of darkness, there's always hope for healing and for a brighter future.
So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep working towards a world where justice and compassion prevail.